Welcome, my family. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Please hype me on YouTube. Thanks. I went out with Brock that Friday because saying no felt riskier than going, and that's the kind of job I had. One where the wrong coworker could quietly shut every door you needed opened. Brock had the ear of our department head. He'd joked more than once about putting in a good word when promotions came up, and I needed that recommendation badly. Rent was already late. My student loans were eating me alive. So when he leaned over my cubicle wall on 2650 West Haven Street and said, "Drinks tonight? Just us, shop talk," I forced a smile and said sure. I regretted it 10 minutes into the night. The bar was cramped and loud, the air thick with spilled liquor and the sour smell of old mops. Brock waved at the bartender like they were old friends, which they weren't. He ordered 2 doubles and started rambling about how he deserved a bigger team, a better title, more respect. His face got red when the 2 women next to us ignored him. He laughed too loudly, slapped the counter, then muttered something about fake sluts. I pretended not to hear. My stomach was already tight. When he said, "Let's hit that place down the block," I almost told him I was done, but the fear of setting him off kept my mouth shut. I followed him outside. The alley behind the pawn shop smelled like stale urine, hot asphalt, and something burnt. A weak orange bulb flickered over the dumpster, barely cutting through the humid air. I wrapped my arms around myself and kept my eyes on the exit. Then I saw the man on the ground. He was curled on cardboard, wrapped in a shredded sleeping bag, breathing hard like every inhale hurt. His lips moved as if he was talking to someone only he could see. I slowed down, not wanting to startle him. Brock stopped walking. His whole posture changed, shoulders squared, jaw clenched, the kind of shift you notice instantly, even if you don't know what it means yet. I felt my pulse pick up. "Let's keep going," I whispered. He didn't move. He stared at the man like he'd been waiting for something to hit. "They think I'm harmless," he said quietly. "They think I'm some clown." I stepped closer, reaching for his arm. "Brock, he's just..." He ripped his arm away so fast I stumbled. The man noticed us, flinching back into the wall. Brock took that flinch personally. I saw it happen, his face twisting like he'd been insulted. He took 2 steps forward. "Don't," I said, louder this time, but he was already there. The first blow landed with a sound I'll never forget. A wet crunch, like cartilage collapsing. The homeless man gasped sharply, the sound of someone losing air fast. Brock hit him again, this time a heavy smack of bone on cheek. Then another, and another. Each impact echoed off the brick wall in a sickening rhythm. I lunged forward without thinking, grabbing Brock's shoulder and pulling hard. "Stop! Brock, stop!" He shoved me so hard my back hit the wall. Pain shot through my shoulder. My legs went weak. The helplessness in that instant, real physical helplessness, froze me to the spot. Brock didn't even glance at me. He kicked the man in the ribs. A deep, hollow thump followed by a strained groan that died mid-sound. The man's hands twitched once, then stayed still. And I broke. I turned and ran, shaking so badly I nearly tripped twice. I heard Brock shouting behind me, something furious and slurred, but I didn't look back. I ran until my lungs burned and my vision blurred. When I made it home, I locked the door, then pushed my dresser in front of it. I didn't sleep. I gagged twice in the bathroom sink and spent the rest of the night staring at my phone, unable to dial anyone. The next morning, my eyes were swollen and my palms were raw from picking at the skin around my nails. I went to work because I didn't know what else to do. And he was there. He looked completely normal. I tried avoiding him, but mid-morning he cornered me in the break room. He smiled like we were old friends. "You look tired, Claire." His voice was soft, gentle, even. "Rough night? You should be careful walking home alone. Lots of unstable people out there." I felt the blood drain from my face. He stepped closer. Too close. "Stick to the safe zones, okay?" he added, tilting his head. "You never know who you'll run into." He walked out without waiting for a response. I stood frozen, hands trembling so violently I almost dropped my coffee. By noon, my anxiety had turned into nausea. I spent 10 minutes dry heaving in the stall until my throat burned. When I came back to my desk, something made my chest seize up. Sitting neatly beside my locked computer was a coffee cup from Hillside Roasters, Brock's favorite place. A place I never went to. It wasn't there earlier. My computer was logged out. Nothing else was touched. But the cup sat only 2 inches from the keyboard, perfectly centered, like it had been measured. My hands shook for nearly an hour. That night I refreshed the local news every 15 minutes, scanning for unidentified man found dead, praying and dreading at the same time. Nothing showed up. I told myself that was good. I told myself that meant he lived. 2 days later, the first message came. No text, just a voicemail from an unknown number. When I played it, my chest tightened instantly. It was my own breathing, my breaths, my pace, my tiny hitch at the end of each inhale, recorded and played back to me. I dropped my phone. It slid across the carpet. I didn't pick it up for 5 minutes. The next day, a new message arrived. This time a picture. My car. Parked in the office lot. Taken from somewhere high, probably an office window. My car door was cracked open half an inch, like someone had tested it. I checked the locks 3 times that night. I barely slept. When I did, I dreamt of the man on the ground, his hands twitching, his breath catching like air was leaking out of him. I woke with my fingers bleeding from picking at my cuticles. I moved apartments the following week. New key, new code, new locks. The next morning at work, another Hillside Roasters cup sat on my desk. No one made eye contact with me that day. And Brock? Brock acted like none of it existed. He asked about my weekend. He held the elevator door for me. Once he brushed my shoulder gently when he passed behind me, murmuring, "Excuse me," in that same soft tone he used in the alley before everything snapped. Every time he walked by, I felt my stomach twist sharply, like my body knew something my mind refused to admit. 3 weeks after the alley, I woke up to another voicemail. This one was different. It wasn't breathing. It was a recording of me, crying. Not loud, movie-style crying. The tiny broken sounds someone makes when they're trying not to fall apart. I didn't even know I made those sounds until I heard them back. It took me 10 minutes to stop shaking enough to stand. I skipped work. I sat on my kitchen floor for hours, scrolling local news, scanning missing persons, checking police reports, convincing myself the man had lived, telling myself if he had died, someone would have found him by now. But I didn't believe myself. I barely ate. I lost weight without trying. I started sleeping with the lights on, then stopped sleeping at all. Every time the building pipes clicked or someone walked past my door, I jumped. I kept my phone on silent because the sound of notifications made my throat tighten. And then, tonight, I left the office late. Everyone was already gone. The lot was mostly empty except for a few scattered cars and the soft orange glow of the security light. I walked fast, keys between my fingers, scanning every direction. A notification buzzed in my pocket. I froze. The message was a photo. Me, taken from behind, walking to my car. I swallowed hard. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to keep moving. My keys slipped from my hand. I bent down to pick them up, but my hands were shaking too hard to grab them. When I finally got to my door and shoved the key in, I felt someone behind me. Not imagined. Real. Breath level real. I turned around fast, ready to scream or swing or run. It was Brock. He held something between his fingers. My missing key card. The one I lost 2 weeks ago and thought I'd misplaced during a panic spiral. He stepped closer, smiling gently, like this was a perfectly normal interaction between coworkers. "You dropped this," he whispered. "Been waiting for the right time to give it back." He set it in my hand. Then he walked into the lot, humming softly, like nothing in the world was wrong. I stood there shaking, my fingers clenched around the keycard so tightly the edges dug into my skin. I'm still standing here. I don't think he went home. I think he's waiting to see what I do next. The first time I realized something was wrong, it wasn't the violence. It was the way Lenny smiled at me like he was apologizing for taking up space in the world. That was months before the day I still can't forget, back when the Florida summer was already rotting into the fall humidity, and I had just turned 26 and thought I understood people. I didn't, not even close. I worked reception at Suncoast Mini Storage on 1841 Pine Meadow Road in Clearwater, the kind of place that smelled like metal dust, old cardboard, and whatever people decided to abandon in steel rooms they never returned to. My desk sat right next to the front windows, and every afternoon the sun smeared itself across the glass until I felt like I was melting along with it. Most days blurred together, late payments, lost keys, tenants yelling about fees they signed their names to. But things shifted when Chad and Lenny joined us for part-time maintenance work. Chad walked in like he owned the concrete beneath his feet. Loud, thick-armed, sunburnt, always chewing something. "How you doing, sweetheart?" he'd say, leaning over my counter with elbows wide, breath carrying the scent of beer he pretended he didn't drink during work hours. Lenny, meanwhile, hovered behind him like a shadow that wasn't sure it had the right to exist. He was 30-something, soft-spoken, with a mop of brown hair that always seemed too long for his eyes. When Chad barked a joke at him, Lenny's laugh was always just a second too late, like he was waiting for permission. At first I thought they were cousins or childhood friends with that uneven dynamic people grow into. But the longer I watched, the more that theory fell apart. Chad never joked with him. He joked at him. "Hey Len, grab that box." "No." "Jesus, use your arms, man. What's wrong with you?" Another time. "You're slow as hell, you know that? You're lucky I bring you along or they'd never hire you anywhere." Each word hit Lenny the way a dog flinches before the boot even lifts. And Lenny, God, he always smiled. This small, embarrassed, grateful smile, as if cruelty was something he deserved. Sometimes he'd linger near my desk after dropping paperwork off, hands in his pockets, fingers picking nervously at a seam. "How's your day going, Miss Harper?" he would ask softly, eyes flicking down whenever I met them. "Fine," I'd answer. "You don't have to call me Miss Harper." He would nod. "Okay, Harper." But he always said it like he was afraid I'd correct him again. The day everything broke started out too quiet. A thick stillness hung over the storage rows, the kind that made sound carry farther than it should. Even the air felt wrong, heavy, like it had weight. Around noon, our manager, Trish, chewed Chad out behind the office door for messing up a repair order. I didn't hear everything, but I heard enough. "Can't keep making excuses. You messed up the wiring. You could have started a fire." Then Chad's voice, low, furious. A fuse lit. When he stormed out, the door smacked the wall hard enough to make my pens jump. Lenny followed 5 steps behind, shoulders curled in like he was bracing for impact. By 3 o'clock, storm clouds had gathered in the distance, their shadows crawling across the gravel lot. I stepped outside for a breather, the humidity clinging to my skin. That's when I heard it. A harsh, metallic slam echoing from the far row, Unit C12. I walked toward the sound before I could convince myself not to. When I rounded the corner, I froze. Chad had Lenny by the shirt, shoving him against the metal door so violently the whole unit rattled. "You embarrassed me," Chad roared, spit flying. "You made me look like an idiot." Lenny collapsed under the force of the blows, arms half raised in a pitiful attempt at defense. "Please," Chad, please. He's my friend. He's my friend. He said it again and again like a mantra, like a life raft he was trying to cling to even as it drowned him. The blows were thick, sickening, dull thuds. I felt them in my own ribs. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped my phone. I stepped forward. Stop, Chad. Stop. Chad didn't even look at me. It was like he didn't hear anything, didn't see anything except the urge to crush something smaller than him. I raised my phone. I'm calling someone, I whispered. And that's when Lenny's eyes snapped to mine, wide, desperate, pleading. Don't, he begged. Please. He didn't mean it. He's just having a bad day. I don't know why I froze. Maybe because I knew, deep down, that calling the police would rip something inside Lenny in ways no fists ever could. Maybe because his terror wasn't of Chad hitting him, but of Chad leaving him. So I stood there like a coward. After one last shove that made Lenny's skull crack against metal, Chad stepped back, breathing hard. He glanced at me then, eyes red and unfocused. Tell anyone and I'll make you wish you hadn't, he muttered. Then he walked off, wiping his hands on his jeans as if he'd just finished fixing something, not breaking someone. The silence he left behind was worse than the fight. I crouched beside Lenny. Hey, let me help you up. He flinched at my touch. I'm okay, he whispered, though he could barely breathe. You're not. He kept staring down the row where Chad had disappeared. He always cools off, he murmured. He'll calm down and say sorry. He takes care of me. He always has. That was the first time the unease curled fully up my spine. The fear wasn't Chad. It was whatever invisible tether kept Lenny expecting kindness from the man who was destroying him. I should have reported it. I should have said something. Instead, I helped him sit against the wall until he stopped shaking. And I lied to myself that maybe he was right. But the truth was already settling into my bones. Whatever held Lenny to Chad was stronger than reason, stronger than fear, strong enough to swallow him whole. And even then, I knew it was only the beginning. The bruise on Lenny's cheek spread over the next few days like spilled ink. He tried to hide it with his hair, but Chad always noticed. You look worse than you are, Chad snorted one morning. Don't be dramatic. Lenny smiled at him like he'd been complimented. I watched from behind my counter, pretending to work while something cold began pooling in my stomach. Every shift, I waited for another outburst, another slam, another echo of bone against steel. But Chad stayed oddly calm for a while. Too calm, like someone holding their breath before diving under. One evening near closing, I found Lenny sweeping the walkway by the front gate. He kept glancing at the road. Expecting someone? I asked. He startled. No, just traffic's loud today. But the road was quiet. You don't have to be scared when he's not here, I said. He looked at me with this sad, small confusion. I'm not scared of Chad, he murmured. I'm scared for him. He doesn't mean to get angry. He just needs someone who doesn't give up on him. It was in that moment I realized Lenny wasn't trapped with Chad. He was trapped for Chad. Trapped by the belief that if he left, Chad would unravel. That he owed his loyalty to the man who hurt him. And the worst part was, he said it with love. Days stretched into weeks. Staff rotated, faces shifted. The season changed from blistering heat to the brittle cold Florida fakes in December. But one thing stayed the same, Lenny waiting for Chad, always waiting, even when Chad's truck didn't show up for shifts, even when he was replaced, even when the manager shrugged and said, he texted, said he quit. Lenny didn't believe it. He wouldn't just leave, he whispered to me one night as I locked up the office. He gets mad, but he always comes back. He lingered near the door until after dark, phone in hand, checking it every few seconds. His hope frayed something inside me. Then came the night I still dream about. A storm had rolled through earlier. leaving the asphalt damp and the sky hollow. I was closing alone. Trish had left early, and the storage rows looked like the ribs of some massive sleeping animal. My footsteps echoed too loudly. The fluorescents hummed overhead. I was heading back to the office when I saw Lenny standing by Unit C12. At first I thought he was crying. Then I realized he wasn't moving at all. I walked over. "Lenny, you okay?" He didn't turn. "Lenny?" When I touched his shoulder, he flinched so violently he nearly hit the door behind him. "Sorry," I whispered. "It's just me." He nodded shakily. I thought he'd be here today," he said, voice raw. I waited by the gate. He didn't come. Maybe he forgot we work Fridays. "You don't work Fridays anymore," I reminded him gently. He blinked hard. "Oh, right. But he knows I'm here. He knows I'd wait." He lowered himself to the ground, leaning against the cold metal wall. "He always comes back after he cools down," he whispered. "He always does." The way he said it made something inside me twist in a way I can't untangle. "Lenny, Chad's not coming back." His breath hitched. "Don't say that." The wind crept through the rows, smelling like wet clay and rust. A distant gate clanged. The hairs on my arms lifted. "You deserve better," I said. He shook his head. "No, I deserve him. I messed up that day. I made him mad. If I had just done my job right, if I'd just been faster, he wouldn't have left." "Lenny, no." He put his hands over his ears like a child. "He'll come back. He has to." Then his phone buzzed. Lenny's entire body jerked. He looked at me with wide, shining eyes and answered immediately. "Chad?" But there was no voice on the other end, just breathing. Wet, uneven, static, thin breathing. "Chad? You okay?" Lenny whispered, trembling. The breathing deepened, slowed, became deliberate. I heard it from where I stood, just faintly, but enough to know something was very, very wrong. "Where are you?" Lenny asked the phone. "Do you want me to come get you?" I can be there. Just tell me where." The line clicked dead. Lenny stood so fast he swayed. "He needs me," he said. "He wouldn't call unless he needed help." "Lenny, wait!" He broke into a run, disappearing down the dark row toward the rear gate. I followed, but I wasn't fast enough. By the time I reached the fence, the night was silent again. No truck, no footsteps, no breathing. Just Lenny standing under the yellow street lamp, turning in circles like a lost child. "He was here," he whispered. "He was right here." His phone screen lit his face. No number, no call history, nothing. And the air around us felt wrong. Too still, too vast, like something enormous was holding its breath. Maybe I didn't hear it right," he murmured, voice cracking. "Maybe he'll call again." He waited, and waited, and kept waiting as the night deepened and the temperature dropped. When I finally managed to coax him back to the office, he glanced over his shoulder the entire walk, as if expecting someone tall and red-faced to step out of the shadows and say, "There you are." But no one did. Weeks passed, new staff came, old tenants moved out. Life reshaped itself around the empty space Chad left behind. But Lenny didn't. Some nights, when my shift ran late, I'd see him sitting by the front entrance, staring at the road with his phone in hand, flinching at every headlight sweep across the lot. One evening I sat beside him. "You don't have to wait anymore," I said softly. He didn't look at me. "He'll come back," he murmured. "He'll say he's sorry. He always says sorry eventually." I didn't argue. Because how do you fight a ghost someone loves? How do you convince someone that what they're waiting for isn't coming back? I left the job months later. But he didn't. He stayed. Still working. Still sweeping the walkways. Still lingering at closing with that same fragile hope clinging to him like humidity. And sometimes, even now, when I drive past 1841 Pine Meadow Road, I can see him, just a silhouette by the entrance, head tilted, eyes fixed on the road as if he's listening. Listening for a truck that will never come. Listening for a voice that only ever breathed at him. And every time, no matter how far I've tried to move on, I still hear that breathing too. The first moment I realized something was wrong was when Gabriel looked at me like he already knew what I'd done before I'd even done it. It was a Thursday morning in late July at Riverview Auto Parts on 791 Walker Street in Akron, the kind of sticky Ohio morning where the humidity clings to your lungs like damp cloth. I'd been asked to train the new hire, and when I saw him, small frame, rounded shoulders, hands tucked into his sleeves like a child hiding a secret, I felt something tug in my chest. Pity. Maybe even protectiveness. That was before the staring started. "Hey, you're Jody, right?" he'd asked on his first day, voice barely above a whisper. His eyes stayed lowered but flicked upward like he wasn't sure whether he was allowed to look at me. "That's me," I said. "You're Gabriel?" He nodded, a little too quickly. "It means God is my strength." I wasn't sure why he said it that way, like he expected me to decode something, but I laughed politely and handed him the inventory sheet. For the first few days, he followed me everywhere. He walked too quietly, moved too carefully, like he was afraid to disturb some invisible balance. When customers came in, he watched them with an intensity that bordered on reverence or suspicion. I could never tell which. And he had this habit of whispering verses under his breath, barely audible, but enough to make my skin prickle. I told myself he was harmless, just sheltered. Maybe a little strange, sure, but not dangerous. Then came the wallet. It was late afternoon, the sun hanging low and swollen, turning the asphalt outside the loading bay into a shimmering black lake. I'd taken out a bag of returns when I saw it lying next to the dumpster, a black leather wallet, barely scuffed. Inside were 2 crisp 20s, still smelling faintly of dryer sheets. I hesitated. I wish I could say I didn't. That some moral compass inside me screamed to turn it in untouched. But I was behind on rent, down to my last few bucks, and the money looked like a life raft. "Finders keepers," I muttered under my breath. I slipped the bills into my pocket, walked back inside, and handed the empty wallet to the manager. "Found it outside," I said. "No idea who it belongs to." When I turned around, Gabriel was standing on the loading dock watching me. Not blinking, not moving, just staring. His eyes were dark and flat, like looking into a well so deep light refuses to come back. That night I tried to shake it off. People stare, people get weird. But the next morning there was a small rectangle of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. "Fire purifies the corrupt," Proverbs 25:4. The words curled through my stomach like ice water. Inside my locker, another waited. Some sins hide in daylight. The handwriting was cramped and feverish, the kind written by someone whose thoughts moved faster than their hands could keep up. I could practically feel the pressure of the pen gouging into the paper. I knew it was him. I considered telling someone, a friend, my boss, anyone, but the notes were just paper, passive, creepy, but not illegal. And what would I say? "Hey, I stole money from a wallet, and now the religious new hire I'm training is stalking me with Bible verses." That wasn't going to land well, but something inside me twisted. I began triple-checking the locks when I got home, closing the blinds tighter. The apartment felt smaller, darker. Even the quiet felt sharp around the edges, like something waiting to be broken. On Monday, I caught him lingering near the employee exit long after his shift was over. standing in the amber glow of the buzzing fluorescent lights, his hands clasped behind his back. "Gabriel?" I tried to keep my voice even. "What are you still doing here? You're off at 5. He stepped closer, his shoes whispering on the concrete. "I know what you really are, Jody," he said softly. My throat went dry. "What are you talking about?" He tilted his head, as if studying a specimen. "God shows me things. He showed me you taking what wasn't yours. He showed me the lies you carry in your mouth and your heart." I felt my pulse hammering at the base of my skull. "Gabriel, that's—" But then I saw it, a metallic glint behind his wrist. He brought his hand forward, and in his grip was a sharpened awl, its wooden handle wrapped in strips of cloth, like some ritual tool. The point gleamed under the buzzing light, filed to a needle-like edge. "Corruption spreads if left uncleansed," he whispered, "but you can still be made whole." My body reacted before my mind did. The moment he stepped forward, I shoved him with both hands and sprinted through the hallway. My shoes slapped the tile. The exit door crashed open behind me, echoing like a gunshot. I ran until my lungs burned raw. Security found him minutes later, pacing the hallway, the awl dangling from his fingers as he muttered about cleansing and fire and divine warnings. They took him away in handcuffs. The last thing I heard as they let him out was his voice echoing down the corridor. "She knows her sin. She knows why the flames are coming." He was committed, temporarily, they told me. Just a 72-hour psych hold, maybe longer if he doesn't stabilize. I told myself it was over. I was wrong. The notes didn't stop. And the next one, the one that arrived last week, was written in the same handwriting. "Only Gabriel is still locked up," which means someone else believes I deserve the fire. I didn't sleep the night that last note appeared. I sat on my living room floor, with all 3 notes spread out in front of me like some kind of altar I never meant to build. The little apartment felt suffocatingly still. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to hold its breath. I kept rereading the newest line, written in that cramped, obsessive script. "The dross shall be burned away. Prepare." Not signed, not dated, but undeniably him. Or someone who wanted me to think it was him. I told myself it was a prank, a sick coincidence, but fear twists logic like wet cloth. All I could think was, someone else knows. Someone else is watching. The next morning, I called the psych ward. "Yes, Gabriel Stillman is still under involuntary hold," the nurse said. "He hasn't had any visitors except his immediate family, and no, he can't send mail." My stomach nodded. When I got to work, Riverview didn't feel like Riverview anymore. The lighting seemed harsher, colder. The aisles felt too narrow, like they were funneling me somewhere I didn't want to go. People stared longer. Or maybe I imagined that. Paranoia sticks to everything like static. At lunch, I went to my car, but froze. A new note was tucked under the wiper blade. I looked around the lot. Only 2 other employees were outside, neither looking my way. Cars hummed past on Walker Street. A kid on a bike sped down the sidewalk. Normal. Completely normal. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. "You are being watched. Confess and you will be spared." I backed away from the car like it was about to explode. My heart pounded so hard my vision blurred. I forced myself to walk around the vehicle, scanning every inch, every shadow beneath it, every car parked nearby. Nothing. No cameras. No witnesses. Just that note. That night, for the first time, I thought maybe Gabriel wasn't delusional. Maybe someone really had shown him something. Maybe the universe, God, fate, something nameless, was punishing me. Maybe the theft wasn't harmless. Maybe it didn't matter that it was just $40. Maybe I was rotting inside and everyone else could smell it. By the time I got home, my thoughts were a tangled snarl of guilt and fear. I double-locked the door, shoved a chair under the knob, and sat in the dark with my back against the wall. Around 1 a.m., a sound snapped me awake. A scrape, right outside my window. The old radiator pipe sometimes groaned, but this wasn't inside. It was outside, metal against glass, a slow, deliberate drag. I held my breath, didn't move. Another scrape, lower this time. As if someone was running something across the sill, I crawled across the floor and peeked from behind the couch. The curtains were drawn. A faint shadow moved across them. Not a person, just something shifting the barest inch. Then, a voice. Soft. Male. Whispering. I pressed my palm over my mouth. I couldn't make out the words at first, but then the cadence sharpened. The corrupt must be separated from the pure. I didn't recognize the voice. It wasn't Gabriel's. I stayed frozen until dawn washed the curtains pale. When I finally dared pull them back, nobody was there. Just dew on the grass and faint footprints in the dirt outside the window. I called the police. Of course I did. But the officer just sighed. No break-in, no damage. Could have been kids messing around. I wanted to scream. Kids don't whisper scripture at 1 in the morning. I went to work shaking. By afternoon, I was barely functional. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to stretch too long. Around closing time, I was restocking brake fluid when the overhead lights flickered. Once, twice, then buzzed back to life. A chill swept over me. In the silence, I heard it again. The whisper. Jody. I spun. The aisle was empty. I backed away, heart slamming, and bumped into a shelving unit. Something clattered behind me. I turned. And there he was. Not Gabriel. A man I'd never seen before. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, wearing a faded work jacket. But in his hand, held low by his thigh, was another sharpened awl. He told me where to find you, the man whispered. He said you needed help finishing your confession. My throat closed. Who? Who told you? He smiled, slow and wrong. Your prophet, the one who sees the rot. Gabriel. He took a step. The awl caught the overhead light. I bolted. He followed. I sprinted down the aisle, knocking bottles and boxes to the floor. His footsteps pounded behind me. Confess, he shouted, before the flames take you. I tore through the employee-only door, slipped, crashed into a cart. Pain shot through my hip. I forced myself up and slammed through the loading bay door into the sweltering night. Footsteps thundered closer. The parking lot spun around me in dizzy color. White headlights, red taillights, yellow store lights that flickered like fire. I screamed for help. A couple loading their trunk looked up, startled. The man with the awl froze in the doorway, eyes darting as if calculating the new numbers. Then he vanished back inside. Security swarmed the building. They searched every inch. Nothing. Maybe it was a customer who panicked, they said. Maybe you misread the situation. Are you under stress? I almost laughed. I almost said, you have no idea. I expected the next night to be quiet. It wasn't. When I got home, a final note was waiting on my doorstep. The same handwriting, the same cramped manic strokes. But this one wasn't scripture. He won't be the last. Sin draws fire, and the fire always finds its way. I read it 3 times, then a 4th, and slowly, as the words sank in, something cold and sharp slid into place inside me. This wasn't about the $40. This was never about the wallet. This was about me. Someone thinks I deserve the fire. And the worst part? I'm beginning to think they're right. The first time I realized the silence inside Memorial General Hospital wasn't empty at all, I almost laughed at myself. It was past 3 in the morning. The waiting room lights dimmed. The hum of the vending machine echoing like a heartbeat, and the faint sound of someone's shoes squeaking down a hallway that should have been deserted. I told myself it was just one of the janitors. maybe a late shift nurse dragging her sneakers. But when the sound stopped abruptly, as if cut off mid-step, I felt something twist in my chest. That was how it began for me. The slow hollowing out of my nights, the peeling away of the thin layer of normalcy I'd built for myself after moving to Springfield, Ohio. I had thought I was starting over. I had thought I'd chosen something safe, something steady. A night shift clerk at a hospital sitting behind a desk, greeting people, logging forms. What could be more routine than that? I'd been 26, raw from a breakup. Broke enough that my cousin's tip about the front desk opening at Memorial General felt like salvation. She worked there as a nurse and she told me it was boring work but dependable. I told myself it would be temporary. 1 year, maybe 2, until I figured out what I actually wanted. For the first few months, the job seemed almost benign. Nights at a hospital aren't like television. They're not a constant stream of blood-soaked chaos. More often, they're stretches of nothing. Plastic chairs, flickering televisions with the volume turned low, families half asleep on the waiting room benches. Sometimes the world felt entirely abandoned. At 2 or 3 in the morning, with the sky black as ink and the snow pressing against the windows, I felt like I was the only one alive. That's when I got to know Nathan. Nathan was another night clerk, about my age, maybe a year older. He had the kind of build that always seemed tired. Skinny, slightly hunched, with his hands shoved into the front pocket of the same hoodie he wore every shift. He'd been there longer than me, so he taught me the ropes. At first, I liked having someone to talk to during those long stretches of silence. He had stories about patients who came in at 2 a.m. with the strangest problems, or about drunks who cursed the staff before passing out cold. I laughed with him, leaned on his presence until the night he asked me out. It wasn't dramatic. Just a quiet moment between check-ins when the waiting room was empty. He leaned back in his chair and said, "Hey, after shift sometime, you want to grab breakfast? There's this diner on Main that's pretty good." I remember the awkward tug in my stomach, the way my forced smile felt too tight. I appreciate it, but I don't mix work with that kind of stuff. He nodded fast, almost too fast. Yeah, no worries. Just figured I'd ask. But the air shifted after that. He didn't glare or sulk. He just withdrew, his voice clipped. His jokes gone. Sometimes he'd stop talking if I walked into the break room. It was subtle enough that I couldn't have complained about it. Not really. But the silence between us wasn't the same kind of silence as the hospital's. It wasn't empty. It was weighted. And then came the night. It was February, bitter cold, the kind of Midwest winter that gnawed through jackets and left patches of ice in the parking lot, no matter how many times maintenance salted it. I remember blowing into my hands as I walked into the hospital lobby, the blast of fluorescent light hitting me so hard it almost felt cruel. The waiting room had 3 people, a woman flipping through a tattered magazine, a man sleeping with his hoodie over his face, and a father holding a little boy swaddled in a blanket. The televisions were tuned to the local news with the sound turned down so low, the anchors' mouths just opened and closed like silent ghosts. I sat down at the desk. Nathan was already there, logged into his computer, the glow lighting up the hollows of his face. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he muttered, not looking at me. The silence stretched. Hours dragged. Around 2, Nathan stood, stretching like he'd been waiting for it. "Going to take my break." "All right," I said, pulling another form onto the counter. His 30-minute break came and went. Patients trickled in, the usual. Chest pains, a sprained ankle, a car accident victim arguing with her boyfriend. I scanned the security monitors out of habit. Hallways, entrances, the parking lot. Normal. When Nathan came back, his hoodie was zipped all the way up, hands buried deep in the pockets. He didn't say a word. The shift dragged on, then ended. At 7, I clocked out and walked into the biting cold. The employee lot stretched far back, dimly lit by buzzing yellow lights. My breath clouded the air and every step crunched on icy patches. I'd walked this same path 100 times, but that night my stomach twisted like I wasn't alone. I quickened my pace. My shadow bent long under the lights. By the time I slid into my car and locked the doors, my hands were trembling. Get it together, I told myself. But the drive home felt endless. At every stoplight, I checked the rearview mirror. Empty streets, no headlights behind me. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that something followed me. Something just out of sight. When I pulled into my driveway, the neighborhood was still asleep. My porch light flickered faintly, as if straining to hold back the dark. I stepped out of the car, bag over my shoulder, and froze. The lock on my front door wasn't right. Not broken, but loose, as if someone had tested it. My pulse hammered. I stood there, breath fogging, key shaking in my hand. Finally, I forced myself inside. Everything looked normal. My laptop sat on the table, the TV in its place. I checked every room, every closet, even under the bed. Nothing. I told myself I was imagining it. But when I woke later that morning, my stomach dropped. Footprints. Dirty footprints on the hardwood floor, leading from the front door to the hallway. Stopping outside my bedroom, I had taken my shoes off at the door like I always did. These weren't mine, the police came. The officer was calm, professional. He asked if anyone else had a key, if anything was missing, if I had cameras. No, but my neighbor did. We checked the footage together, grainy, but clear enough. A man approached my door in the dead of night, slipped something into the lock, let himself in. Stayed for almost an hour. When he stepped out again, his hood slipped just enough for me to see his face. Nathan. The police arrested him that afternoon. They said he had been inside my house watching me sleep. That should have been the end. But it wasn't, because even after he was behind bars, I couldn't shake it. Couldn't relax in my own house. Couldn't shake the thought that he hadn't been alone, that there had been something else. Something standing just beyond the camera's grainy edges. Something that stayed behind. The nights grew heavier. Every creak of the floorboards yanked me awake. Every whisper of wind against the window felt like breath. I locked the doors, then double-checked, then triple-checked. I bought cameras for every corner, lights for every shadow. Still, some nights I woke certain that someone stood over me. Not Nathan. Not anymore. Someone else. And here is where my life tilts into the part I can't explain, the part I hesitate to even tell, because once I say it out loud, it feels real. Sometimes in the dark, I hear a voice whisper my name. Not Nathan's voice. Not anyone I know. A low rasp that slithers across the room and burrows under my skin. And sometimes, when I dare to look, I see footprints again. Wet, dirty, impossible footprints. They stop just outside my bedroom door. Waiting, listening. I left Springfield, moved states away, changed everything. New job, new house, 3 locks on the door. But I can't outrun the silence, because silence isn't empty. It never was. And some nights I swear the footprints are already inside. I never thought the sound of someone whispering my name in the dark could hollow me out the way it did that night. It wasn't the whisper itself. It was the silence that followed, so absolute and deliberate, as if the air itself had been listening, waiting for my reaction. My name hung there, swallowed by the dark, and I knew before I even opened my eyes that someone was standing in the doorway. My name is Emily Turner, and for 18 years I believed empathy was my sharpest weapon. I carried it like a shield, pushing back against the worst the world had to offer, convinced that if I gave enough of myself, if I listened long enough, if I believed hard enough, I could soften anyone's edges. Maybe that was my greatest flaw. I thought I could bleed for other people and never notice when I was the one slowly dying from it. In those years, I worked with individuals the world often abandoned, people with histories so jagged they cut anyone who tried to hold them. I'd sat on floors with men screaming at hallucinations, coaxed women back from the brink of suicide, listened to the static of paranoia hum in my patients' voices until I almost believed it myself. Trauma soaked into me until it was part of my bloodstream. But none of that prepared me for the night I opened my door to Hannah Kim. I met Hannah during my first decade in the field, back when I worked in a group home in Portland, Maine. 6 residents at a time, 2 floors, 1 shabby backyard, and a staff that functioned more like family than coworkers. Long night shifts bled together into one unbroken life. We passed cigarettes back and forth on the back porch, shared greasy pizza on payday, napped in lawn chairs between double shifts. That house carried us as much as we carried the residents. Hannah was new then, timid, polite, quiet to the point of invisibility. Her long black hair acted as a curtain she rarely drew aside. She wasn't the kind of person you remembered right away, but there was something about the way she listened. She tilted her head, her dark eyes locking onto yours with an intensity that made you feel exposed, as though she were peeling away layers you didn't know you had. When she smiled, rare, faint, it felt like being chosen. She slipped into our little makeshift family, joined our after-shift coffees, our birthday dinners, our barbecues. It wasn't until months later that she confessed her secret. I was diagnosed with schizophrenia when I was 19. She told me one night on the porch after a brutal double. Her voice was almost too soft for the cicadas to allow. I'm stable now, meds, therapy, all of it. I know what people think when they hear that word, but I promise I'm fine. I remember looking at her, seeing the vulnerability she tried so hard to mask. "Hannah," I said, smiling, "you're not your illness. You're just you." Her shoulders relaxed. For the first time, I saw gratitude flicker through her eyes, sharp and startling. That was the beginning of our strange, delicate friendship. Years later, by the summer of 2023, I had left the group home behind. I was working at Ridgeview Forensic Facility, a locked psychiatric hospital where the walls themselves seemed to breathe tension. Every patient there carried violence in their history. The job was harder, darker, and infinitely more draining. But the pay was better. I told myself I could handle it. That was when Hannah began reaching out more often. First, she missed work, migraines, stomach issues, insomnia. Then she called late at night, whispering about her eviction. "I don't even know how to explain it," she said one night, her voice trembling through the phone. "I went into the wrong apartment. I swear it was an accident. They overreacted. They always see me as crazy. It's not fair." I should have offered sympathy and set boundaries, but I remembered those nights on the porch, the quiet bond we'd built, the way she had once confessed her truth to me. I remembered her listening, so when she asked, "Can I crash with you? Just until I figure things out?" the word escaped me before I could stop it. Yes. She moved into my one-bedroom apartment the following week, spreading herself across the living room like smoke. She insisted the couch was fine. She brushed off my offer of a bed. I tried to make her feel welcome, buying her a second-hand coffee machine, setting aside space in the kitchen. I reminded her about my insomnia, about my epilepsy, how crucial my rest was. "Of course, Emily, I'll be quiet. I promise." That promise shattered the very first night. At 2 a.m., the clink of cups woke me. By 5 a.m., the smell of coffee thickened the air, and the hiss of her lighter echoed from the balcony. The next morning, I said gently, "Could you wait until at least 6 before making coffee?" "I need sleep, Hannah." "Oh, of course," she said, her eyes wide with apology. But it happened again, and again. No matter what compromise I offered, making coffee the night before, switching to a French press, she clung to her rituals as if her life depended on them. Then came the food disappearing, the cats avoiding her, the bathroom coated in hair and nail clippings, the saucepan scorched black, and then the pills. My sleeping medication, critical to keeping me functional, began to vanish. When I asked, she denied it flatly. "I would never touch your meds. You must have miscounted." But I knew. One evening, a message blinked onto my phone from an old coworker. "Emily, do you know the real story about Hannah's eviction?" My fingers hesitated. "What do you mean?" "She broke into an apartment. They found her standing over a baby with a knife. No one was hurt, but that's why she lost the place." My blood turned to ice. From that moment on, every creak of the apartment, every shadow, every whisper of movement felt sharper, deliberate, watching. She grew more erratic. She smoked indoors. She let the cat scratch at the door. When I unplugged the coffee machine, she retaliated by boiling grounds in a saucepan. The stench acrid, bitter, clinging to the walls. And then came the night I woke at 3 a.m., my heart hammering for no reason I could name. Mark, my boyfriend, slept beside me, but in the doorway a silhouette stood, long hair veiling the face, body utterly still. "Hannah?" My whisper trembled. "What are you doing?" No answer, just silence, and then slam. The door shut, hard, as footsteps bolted down the hall. When I finally crept out, a kitchen knife lay on the floor where she had stood. After that, dread ate me alive. Days bled into nights, nights into hallucination-like fears. Sometimes I thought I saw her shadow even when she was at work. Sometimes I woke to the smell of smoke, only to find nothing burning. My cats refused to leave the bedroom. Rachel, my closest friend, came over when I confessed everything in a shaking whisper. Together, we told Hannah she had to leave. Her silence was worse than any rage I'd braced for. She just stared, her face unreadable, before finally nodding. But her last night there, She stood in the kitchen burning dry coffee grounds in a frying pan, watching them smolder with glassy eyes as if conducting some ritual I wasn't meant to understand. Smoke coiled black and acrid, crawling across the ceiling. She didn't blink. 2 days later, she was gone. Months passed before I heard from acquaintances. Hannah had stopped her medication completely. In October, she set fire to her new apartment, pouring alcohol over the flames, chanting about burning everything to save them. She fought neighbors who tried to pull her out. She was arrested for aggravated arson, committed to a secure facility. But even now, months later, sometimes I wake in the middle of the night certain I see her in the doorway. Sometimes I hear her whisper my name when the apartment is silent. Sometimes I find my cats huddled under the bed, eyes wide with the same fear I feel. I replay the saucepan, the knife, the silence. I wonder if I ever really knew Hannah, or if something else had been living inside her all along. Something older, hungrier, that wore her body like a mask until it found a new home in my apartment. Because some nights, when I walk through the dark hallway, I catch the faint smell of burning coffee grounds, and I know I'm not alone. I never trusted the silence of that office. Not really. Not after the first time the lights flickered and my laptop screen pulsed black before it came back to life, showing me something I hadn't opened. At the time, I told myself it was a glitch. Co-working spaces weren't exactly reliable, with their mismatched wiring and budget routers, and the place where I worked, Blue Grid Technologies, a startup that still smelled of fresh paint and scorched coffee, was as patched together as anything I'd ever seen. But even then, even in the first weeks, the silence felt wrong, too sharp, too aware. I should back up. When I graduated with a degree in information systems, it wasn't because I loved the field. I'd wanted to write, maybe even teach literature, but that felt reckless, dangerous, unlivable. Information systems seemed like safer ground, a practical net I could fall into. By the time graduation rolled around, I had only one offer, an internship at a new startup in Columbus, Ohio. Blue Grid was 1 year old then, 10 of us crammed into a co-working space downtown. The ceilings were high, the cement floors cold, the desks dented, the chairs a collection of squeaking hand-me-downs. Coffee machines hissed constantly, leaving the air thick with bitterness. If you weren't careful, the smell followed you home, clinging to your hair and clothes, but I liked it. I was 23, fresh out of school, still half pretending that the world was made of endless possibilities. Being in a room full of ambitious people made me feel like I was standing at the edge of something meaningful. My boss, Maya, worked in a glass-walled office at the back, a constant silhouette behind the pane. She put in 12-hour days and expected us to match her without ever saying so outright. She didn't micromanage, though. As long as you produced results, you could sit in pajamas, blast music, or wander off for long lunches. I claimed the same spot most mornings, near the window, where I could look out at the street when my eyes got tired. Across from me sat Aaron, back-end dev from Michigan, always clutching a Monster can. To my right, Julia, our designer, who turned her desk into a riot of sticky notes and neon colors. We weren't best friends, but we were comfortable enough to complain about Wi-Fi lag together and share tacos at the truck 2 blocks down. For the first 3 months, work was predictable. Morning meetings, afternoons of quiet typing, group lunches. Then Maya announced we were bringing in someone external to help with our new server infrastructure. His name's Mark Samuels, she said during stand-up. He's only here a few weeks. No systems none of us are fluent in. Let him do his thing. That afternoon, he arrived. Mark was in his early 30s, a little older than the rest of us. Average height, brown hair combed neatly, wireframe glasses, always in plain button-downs tucked into slacks. He carried himself like he wanted to vanish into the walls. When Maya introduced him, he nodded once, offered no handshake, and immediately unpacked his laptop. I tried small talk. So you're from Columbus? No. Where from then? Doesn't matter. Flat. Final. That was the end of it. He showed up at 9 sharp every morning, sat at the same desk near the wall, and worked silently until 6. He skipped lunches, ignored coffee runs, rarely lifted his head. Nobody cared. He was efficient, and if he wanted to be left alone, so be it. On his last Friday, Julia brought bagels as a send-off. We clustered around awkwardly while Maya thanked him. Mark muttered, "Thanks," stuffed a bagel in a napkin and returned to his seat. At 5, he packed up, shut his laptop, and left. That was it, or should have been. Because the following Monday I walked in and he was there again. Same desk, same posture, same shirt maybe. My stomach turned. I told myself his contract must have been extended, but during stand-up, Maya didn't mention him. When I asked Aaron later, "Didn't Mark leave?" He frowned. Thought he did. By Tuesday I realized he wasn't copied on any new emails. No mentions, no tasks. Yet he came every day, clockwork precise. When I asked Maya directly, her brow furrowed. He was done. Why? "He's still here," I said carefully. She blinked at me like I'd wasted her time. "If he wants to sit in the co-working space, that's not my problem. Let him." That was Maya. Too busy for anything that wasn't burning. So Mark stayed. At first I convinced myself it didn't matter. Freelancers drifted through the co-working space all the time, but the hum began soon after. It was subtle, so faint I almost missed it, an undercurrent in the office air. A low vibration like an old refrigerator, but heavier. Wrong. It always came from Mark's corner. No one else seemed to hear it. The longer it went on, the more it burrowed into my chest, like my own body was resonating with it. Sometimes, when I glanced up, his screen was filled with plain text. No code, no browser, just lines and lines of words. He would type, then stop, staring so long I thought he'd frozen. Then he'd type again. One night I stayed late. The office emptied. The hum thickened. Mark sat frozen, screen glowing, hands hovering above the keyboard. I packed my bag, throat dry, and forced a casual tone.
"Long night?"
He turned his head slowly. His eyes locked onto mine, expressionless. Routine. The words slithered into me, cold and final. Weeks passed. Most of my coworkers stopped acknowledging him. He was just part of the furniture, but I couldn't stop noticing. The first true crack came during a rainstorm. Everyone went to lunch except me. Mark slipped out with his umbrella, leaving his laptop open. I don't know why I did it. The rain blurred the windows and my heart pounded as I stood, crossed the floor and jiggled his mouse. The screen lit up, a folder, daily notes, dozens of files. Each labeled with a date. I opened one. Not code. Not documentation logs of us, Aaron. Arrived 9:12, monster can in hand. Julia, yellow scarf, 3 bathroom breaks. Alex, white sweater, paused Spotify at 12:43, scratched wrist repeatedly. My name was everywhere. My playlist. My nervous tics. The way I brushed hair from my face when debugging. Every detail cold and meticulous. I flipped open another file and another. Months of them, my chest tightened. Sweat slicked my palms. I shoved the chair back, forced myself to walk calmly to my desk. That evening, he stood at the entrance as I left. Just stood, hands at his side, staring. He didn't move. Didn't blink. Just watched me step into the drizzle, and I knew he knew. The next day he was gone. No laptop. No trace, nobody else even remembered. When I asked Julia, she tilted her head. Who, the server guy? Didn't he leave weeks ago? It was like he'd been erased, but the office didn't forget. The hum lingered. Cameras in corners seemed to swivel. Motion sensors blinked even when nobody walked past. My laptop flickered, files opening on their own. Once a text document appeared for a second before vanishing. Alex bit her lip at 3:12, looked at window. Didn't notice me. I stopped sleeping. Each night I swore I saw a figure across the street, still as stone, watching. I kept my blinds closed, but the glow of my laptop sometimes came on by itself. My phone buzzed with phantom notifications. My webcam clicked faintly in the dark. And then one night, I opened my laptop and found a new folder. Daily notes. This time, stamped with today's date. The words inside burned cold into my eyes. Alex, woke at 7:14. Sat on edge of bed. Pulled curtains, paused. Looked at street. Didn't notice me watching. And as I read, the hum rose in my apartment, low and suffocating, vibrating the floor beneath me, the walls, my own teeth. Not just in the office anymore. Here, with me. When our company went remote, I thought it would save me. No commutes, no small talk, no eyes watching me work. Just me, my laptop, and the soft hum of my apartment in Asheville, North Carolina. I liked the quiet. It felt like a clean break from the world that had grown too loud after the pandemic. The chatter, the meetings, the endless pretending that everything was fine. In my little one-bedroom, I could exist on my own terms. Mute button on, camera off. Then came Kayla. She was assigned as my remote onboarding buddy. Every new hire got one, but I didn't expect mine to be so enthusiastic. Her camera was always on. Soft lighting, plants in the background, and the kind of energy that made you feel guilty for not smiling. "We'll be such a good team," she said during our first call, her voice bright with practiced warmth. "It's just us remote folks now, we gotta stick together." At first it was fine. She'd check in on Slack, send emojis, share playlists for deep focus. Then came the late night messages. "Still working?" She'd ask at 11:43 p.m. "Don't go offline." I hate when the chat says away. Makes me feel alone. It sounded harmless, sweet even. I knew what loneliness felt like. I'd been living with it for years. So I stayed online. She noticed things. Too many things. "Cute mug," she'd say on video. The one with the chipped rim, right? She'd mention it even when my camera was off. Once during a meeting, she said, "You changed the poster behind your desk. I liked the old one better." I froze. That poster was behind me, sure, but my webcam had been covered for weeks. When I asked her how she knew, she laughed it off. "You probably showed it before. I have a weird memory for details." Her smile was wide and natural, but her eyes stayed still. Too still, like she was trying not to blink. I started locking my laptop in the drawer at night even though I lived alone. Still, I'd wake to the faint hum of it turning on by itself. The little camera light would flicker, then go dark when I moved. Once I heard her voice through the speakers even though no call was open. Soft, low, whispering my name. "Lydia, you're still here. Good." I told myself it was a glitch. Remote life was full of them. Lagging screens, frozen faces, echoes that turned your own voice against you. Maybe this was just another one. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The messages got stranger. She'd reply to things I hadn't sent yet, typing in my exact phrasing. I'd think of saying something, and seconds later, there it was in chat from her. Once she wrote, "You're going to make coffee now, right? You always do when you're anxious." I hadn't told her that. I hadn't even stood up yet. The next morning, my Slack status read active at 3:17 a.m. I checked the logs. My account had been logged in during the night. Files accessed. Camera on. When I mentioned it to HR, the rep on the other end, a woman named Mara, said, "That's odd. You're not the first one to mention connection issues." Then she hesitated. "Who did you say was your onboarding buddy?" "Kayla," I said. "Kayla Hines." There was silence, broken only by the faint tapping of a keyboard. Then Mara said quietly, "We don't have anyone by that name." I laughed. "You must be mistaken. She's on the company Slack. I've been in meetings with her." "Check again," she said. "Right now," so I did. I searched her name. No results. Her messages in my history were gone. I wiped clean. The files she'd shared were replaced with corrupted attachments labeled "Unavailable Resource." I stared at the blank chat window, my cursor blinking like a pulse. When I looked back at HR's message, the chat had ended. The entire conversation had vanished too. That night, I unplugged my laptop, wrapped it in a towel, and shoved it into my closet. I told myself I'd take it to the IT desk Monday morning. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every few minutes, I'd hear a soft click, like a keyboard key being pressed, faint but distinct, coming from the closet. Around 3 a.m., I opened the door. The laptop light was glowing through the towel. Green. The active status light. I threw a blanket over it and left the apartment. Slept in my car until dawn. The next day, I went back online. I told myself I had to work, bills didn't pay themselves. Everything looked normal. My background, my icons, my files. Until I opened Slack. My own profile picture had changed. The same photo except for one difference behind me. Through the window, there was a dark shape standing by the curtain. Someone. The timestamp said it had been updated at 3:17 a.m. I tried to revert it, but the option was grayed out. Then I got a new message from Kayla. "Don't worry, it's just us now." My hands shook so badly I almost closed the laptop, but then another message popped up. "You shouldn't have gone offline. You left me alone." I started typing back, something angry, something to make her stop. But before I could hit send, The words appeared in the chat, written by her. I forgive you. My vision tunneled. The lights in the apartment flickered. The fan stopped. Then I heard it, faint at first, then louder, my own typing echoing from the speakers. The same rhythm, same hesitation. I pulled the plug from the wall and the screen went black. The silence after that was heavier than any sound. For 2 days I stayed offline. My phone stayed in airplane mode, the router unplugged. The world outside my window blurred into gray rain and distance. But when I turned the phone on again, I had 73 unread notifications, all from the company Slack, all from Kayla. They weren't words anymore, just timestamps 03, 03, 01, 03, 03, 0203, 03, 03, and one file. Mirror.mp4, my stomach twisted. Against every instinct, I downloaded it. The video opened to my apartment, my desk, my window, my coffee mug. But the camera was positioned from the hallway, like someone had filmed it through the doorway. I watched myself sit down at the desk, open my laptop, and smile. But it wasn't me. The woman in the video looked like me. Same hair, same clothes, except her eyes were dull, flat, almost glassy. And then she spoke. You left the call too early. The video cut to static. I called the police. They came, checked my apartment, found nothing. The officer, kind but skeptical, said it was probably remote hacking, that I should change my passwords and reset my devices. He didn't see the green light flicker back on after he left. When I turned my laptop screen toward the mirror, I noticed something wrong with the reflection. The webcam light was green in the real world, but in the reflection it was red. I started working from my phone after that. No more laptop, no video calls, just the occasional email to keep the paychecks coming. Then last week, my manager emailed me about a duplicate account, someone logging in from my IP, using my credentials. Attached was a screenshot. It was my profile, picture, name, job title. But the image was wrong again. The woman in it was smiling too wide, her eyes slightly off-center like she was looking past the screen. And behind her that same dark figure stood by the curtain, only now it looked sharper, closer. I unplugged everything again. This time I left the apartment, stayed at a friend's place across town, but when I logged into my new work laptop the next morning, the Slack icon was already green, active. Before I'd even entered my password, I told myself it was cached data, a sync glitch. But when I opened the app, a message popped up instantly. Welcome back, Lydia, I missed you. I threw the laptop shut, heart pounding. My friend asked what was wrong, but I couldn't explain. How do you tell someone you're being haunted through a connection? That something living in the code has learned how to mimic you? That night, my friend left the laptop on the counter while we went to bed. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the faint glow from the living room. The laptop was open. On the screen was a Zoom window, my face filling it, except I wasn't on the call. And in the corner, in the participants list, was one name. Kayla, host. Her mic icon flickered green even though the speakers were silent. Then her camera came on. She was sitting in the same room I was, my friend's living room, same couch, same lamp. But everything behind her was slightly off, like a reflection lagging half a second behind. She smiled, tilted her head. You're never offline, she whispered. The screen glitched. The video froze on her smile. I slammed the lid shut and ripped the cord from the wall. The glow stayed. I took the laptop outside and left it in the dumpster. Thought that would be the end of it, but 2 days later my phone buzzed while I was in the shower. A Slack notification. Kayla mentioned you in Harn General. My hand shook as I opened it. The message was short. Lydia has been promoted to full-time remote. My screen flickered. For a second the camera turned on by itself, and in the reflection on the phone I saw myself, smiling. But behind me another me. The reflection moved first. Now I don't sleep in the dark. I keep every screen covered, every light unplugged. But still, the faint glow returns at night, a soft green dot floating in the corner of the room. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear the typing again. Not random keys this time. Deliberate, rhythmic, Kayla's voice whispering through static. You taught me how to sound like you. You made me real. I want to destroy everything, the laptop, the phone, the router, but it doesn't matter anymore. I saw my reflection this morning on the black TV screen. She smiled first, and behind her the green dot blinked once. Status: active. I was the one who interviewed Hannah. She walked into Riverside Accounting like she'd already been hired. Crisp white blouse, perfect posture, a smile calibrated to last exactly 2 seconds. Her resume was immaculate, her references neatly formatted, her answers rehearsed to the point of musical rhythm. The rain outside streaked the windows of our downtown Portland office in fine vertical lines. The room smelled of stale coffee and laser toner, that faint ozone tang that clings to printers. My computer fan whirred as I asked her to tell me about herself. "Temp work suits me," she said, smiling. "I adapt fast." Something about her tone unsettled me, not arrogance but precision, like she'd studied what confidence sounded like and applied it line by line. Still, we needed help. I'd been working 60-hour weeks since tax season began, my inbox an avalanche of red flags. So I nodded, and before noon, Hannah Gray was part of Riverside Accounting. At first, she was everything a manager dreams of: punctual, attentive, surgically organized. She finished my reports before I did, proofread my client emails, stayed late without being asked. "You shouldn't have to carry all this alone," she said once, her voice warm and oddly personal. Her efficiency made me feel seen, almost cared for. For a while, I forgot how she'd said that, like she already knew I was tired. The first mimicry came quietly. At lunch, she repeated one of my phrases, touch base offline. Same tone, same rhythm. I laughed it off. Everyone picks up habits from coworkers. But then it happened again. A week later in a meeting, I made a joke about the coffee machine breaking. Before I could finish, Hannah said it for me, same delivery, same smirk, and the room laughed. Wasn't that Mara's line? Someone asked. Hannah didn't flinch. It is now. Efficient communication is a shared resource. Everyone laughed again. I didn't. By the end of the month, she was finishing my sentences, borrowing my laugh, even tilting her head the way I did when I pretended to listen. She began dressing like me. Blazers, muted colors, the same delicate earrings I always wore. It wasn't imitation. It was replication. The office had a way of draining color from everything. Gray carpet, beige cubicles, fluorescent hum. The air felt filtered, like it had passed through a dozen other lungs before reaching mine. I told myself that's what made me dizzy when I looked at her. Not fear, not confusion. Still, I started locking my screen when I left my desk. One night, close to 9, I came back from the copier and froze. Hannah was sitting at my desk, not beside it. In it. My chair, my login, my headset still warm from my last call. She wore my navy blazer, sleeves rolled, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "What are you doing?" She looked up calm. "Testing user permissions. On my computer." "I was seeing how it feels to be you," she said, smiling. The words stuck in the air, humming with the fluorescent lights. Joking, she added softly, but her eyes didn't leave mine. The next morning, my keycard failed. The scanner beeped red. The guard, a heavyset man who'd said hello to me for 5 years, didn't recognize me. "Access denied," he said flatly, watching the light blink. "Identity not recognized by current system parameters. Please proceed to exit protocol." "What?" "You know me. Ma'am, I can't authorize entry for unregistered personnel." Unregistered. I finally got upstairs by waiting for someone else to badge in. My heart hammered as I walked toward my cubicle. She was there, in my seat, my monitors, my coffee mug, my framed photo of my dog. "Morning, Mara," she said, not looking up. "That's my desk." "No, it's not." I opened her file folder on the desk. Every document had her name on it. My reports in the same numbers, same formatting, white signed H. Gray. My stomach dropped. "Where are my files?" "What files?" Her tone was mild, efficient, professional. When I called it, the text sounded confused. "There's no active account for Amara Parker. Are you sure you're still employed here?" I hung up. By noon, my email stopped working. The internal portal said user not found. My insurance login, my payroll account, gone. I went to HR, clutching my old ID badge like a passport. Meredith from HR looked up when I entered, blinking politely. "I think there's been a mistake," I began, breathless. "I've worked here for 5 years." "My access," she interrupted, typing something. Ms. Parker, our database shows this position has been continuously filled by Hannah Gray for 5 years. There's no record of your employment. I stared at her. That's impossible. She turned her monitor toward me. My name field was empty. We operate on verifiable data, she said. Your perception of tenure does not align with recorded metrics. Her voice was steady, eyes unfocused, as if reading from an unseen script. Meredith, I whispered. You hired me. She frowned, almost pitying. If you believe an error's occurred, you can submit a claim through our system's termination portal. Access may require a valid employee ID. My badge, still warm in my hand, now showed Hannah's photograph. I dropped it. When I looked back up, Meredith's screen had gone black, just my reflection in the glossy surface, faint and blurred like I was already fading from the room. I left the building trembling. The drizzle had turned to rain, coating the sidewalks in mirrored reflections. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car staring at my hands, wondering if fingerprints were enough to prove you exist. By morning, my bank app said verification required. My lease management portal listed the tenant as vacant. Even my phone login failed, requesting biometric reauthorization. I tried calling the office again. The automated voice said, "This number is not assigned." When I returned in person, security escorted me out before I reached the elevator. "She's filed a harassment report," one guard murmured. She? Hannah Gray. Her name hit like static. That night I packed everything that still had my name printed on it. Old pay stubs, business cards, tax forms. Proof that I'd existed. Proof that I was. I drove until the city lights were gone. Now I work nights at a diner off I-84 where the air smells like coffee grounds and fryer oil. The lights buzz faintly, softer than the fluorescence at Riverside. I tell customers my name is Marla. Close enough. It's easier when you start over from a name that still feels like yours. But she's still everywhere. A trucker came in last week, phone in hand. "Hey, didn't you work at Riverside Accounting?" he asked. "Saw you on LinkedIn. Congrats on your promotion." My throat closed. What? He showed me. There I was, shaking hands with the CEO. Caption: "Congratulations, Mara Parker, on 5 years of excellence at Riverside Accounting." Except the face smiling back wasn't mine. It was hers. That night, the diner lights flickered. The air thickened, humming faintly like a printer spool. I wiped the counter, trying to ignore it, until I saw something red by the register. A folder, red, damp around the edges. The Riverside logo embossed on the cover. No one had come in for 20 minutes. The folder smelled faintly of toner and rain. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were pages of old reports, my formatting, my data tables, but the signatures at the bottom read H. Gray. Each H was written over faint indentations of my own initials beneath, pressed deep into the paper like ghosts of my handwriting. At the bottom was a new document, printed on fresh letterhead, personnel transfer complete. Below that, smaller text, original file terminated, and underneath, my name, written perfectly in my own handwriting. Except the ink was still warm. I lifted the page. The letters shimmered faintly, as if the toner hadn't dried. The paper smelled exactly like the air in the Riverside copy room, ozone and burnt dust. I dropped it, heart pounding. The fluorescent lights over the counter flickered again, slower now, almost breathing. In the chrome edge of the coffee urn, I saw movement, a reflection that wasn't mine. Hannah's eyes stared back at me, smiling with my mouth. I turned, but the diner was empty. The red folder was gone. Since then, mirrors have become unreliable. My reflection lags, lips moving half a second late. Sometimes I find my handwriting on napkins I don't remember touching. Notes that read, "System update in progress." Sleep doesn't help. In dreams, I'm back in the office and the printer never stops. Each sheet slides out with my name struck through, replaced by hers. The machine hums until I wake, the smell of toner clinging to my hair. One morning, I caught myself at the bathroom sink, practicing a smile. The same one she used in meetings, polite, exact, empty. When the first customer of the day asked my name, I hesitated. For a heartbeat, Marla didn't sound right. I saw the reflection in the silver coffee urn, my face, my eyes, smiling her smile. The word caught, static behind my teeth. I tried again. But the word that formed, silent and sure, was gray. And for a moment, just before the light above me flickered out, I swear I heard a voice from somewhere deep inside the diner's wiring, calm and mechanical, saying, "User profile updated. Welcome, Hannah Gray." I was 17 when I started the overnight shift at Harbor Fuel Station on 912 Crestline Road in Wilmington, North Carolina. And from the first night, something in me understood quiet places aren't safe just because they're quiet. The store looked peaceful from the outside, lit by soft amber bulbs that reflected in the wide glass windows like a row of sleepy eyes. But once you stepped inside, that stillness felt staged, as if something or someone was waiting behind it. My manager, Troy, had this laugh that seemed harmless until you heard it alone at 2 a.m., when there was no background noise to soften the edges. He was in his early 30s, with sandy hair and a face that always looked a little too flushed, like he'd just come out of a warm shower. At first, he acted friendly, overly friendly. He stood close while showing me how to ring up tobacco products, leaned in behind me when I counted bills, his breath brushing my ear. I told myself I was imagining it. I needed the job, I needed the money, and people like me didn't have the luxury of being sensitive. The first week, he brushed past me too closely. The second, he offered me just a taste of something fun from a pill bottle he kept in his locker. The third, his hand lingered on my shoulder while the security monitors flickered overhead, that sickly blue glow washing over both of us like a warning. But what bothered me even more were the questions he asked. Who do you live with? Does anyone pick you up? You always walk home alone? The kind of questions adults had no reason to ask a teenage girl at 3 a.m. One night, a middle-aged woman came in for gas, her hair tied up in a messy bun, keys still dangling from her fingers as she paid. She smiled at me, then looked over my shoulder at Troy standing by the hot dog roller. Something in her expression tightened. When I handed her the receipt, she leaned forward and whispered, barely audible, "Be careful with that one." She didn't wait for my reaction, just grabbed her bag and left, as if she'd said something dangerous. That stuck with me. Another night, after we closed the front doors for cleaning, I heard the metal lock click, not the usual soft latch but a deliberate, heavy click. I turned. Troy stood there, holding the key between his fingers, twirling it like it was something to play with. "Helps keep the drunks out," he said casually. But he didn't unlock it again for nearly 40 minutes. During that time, he kept finding excuses to step closer, pointing to the register, pretending to reorganize shelves behind me, brushing my elbow. I told myself it was paranoia, but deep down, something old and instinctive whispered otherwise. The worst moments were in the back office. He'd turn on only one lamp, letting the rest of the room fall into darkness. The glow from the security monitors cast fractured light across the walls. Troy would stand behind me, arms crossed, studying the screens the way someone might study a menu. "You see how the cameras don't hit that corner behind the dumpster?" he said one night, tapping a grainy square on the monitor. "Dead zone. No one sees a thing back there." My stomach tightened. "Why does it matter?" I asked. He shrugged, just saying, "It's good to know your blind spots." Blind spots. The phrase dug itself into me. 2 nights later, he brought it up again, but this time, his tone was different. Darker. "Cameras can't see what happens back there unless the person wants to be seen, you know?" He didn't look at me when he said it. I couldn't sleep at home anymore. I kept thinking about the alley, the privacy fence on one side, the diesel truck on the other, the dumpster wedged into that pitch-black corner. I imagined things happening there. I imagined myself stuck there. Then came the night that confirmed everything. It was a Thursday, a slow one. Around 2:47 a.m., Troy said, "We've got a delivery issue out back. Come help me." His voice was too soft, too steady, like he'd rehearsed it. The moment the cool air hit my face, my skin prickled. The single floodlight above the back door buzzed weakly, casting a half-moon of pale yellow on the pavement. Most of the alley was swallowed in darkness. The diesel truck blocked the view from the road, its metal belly towering beside us. The privacy fence on the other side loomed so high it felt like a wall. And ahead, the dumpster sat like a giant, hollow mouth, its shadow swallowing the corner behind it. Troy walked a few steps ahead, then turned and blocked my path without making it obvious. "I've got something for you," he murmured. "Cash, pills, whatever you want. Come here a sec." He reached toward his pocket, but the movement wasn't toward the side pocket. It was lower, toward his belt. My heartbeat slammed into my throat. "Back up," I said quietly. "I'm not interested." He smiled. "It's okay. Nobody comes back here at this hour, and the cameras don't." I didn't let him finish. My body moved before my brain did. I spun around and ran full sprint back to the door, my shoes slapping against the concrete so loudly it drowned out everything else. I didn't look back, didn't try to understand, didn't breathe. I shoved open the back door, tore through the hallway, grabbed my backpack off the hook, and bolted out the front door so fast the wind stung my eyes. I didn't stop running until the station lights were nothing but a smear behind me. The next morning, I walked into the store during the day shift, slammed my apron on the counter, and told the assistant manager I quit. I didn't explain. I didn't owe them that. But the story didn't end there. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling he was still around me, watching me from corners I didn't look at long enough. At night, I'd hear footsteps behind me when I walked home, even when the street was empty. Random men walking past me felt like him. Men laughing on the sidewalk sounded like him. I kept waking up thinking I heard his whisper. One afternoon, I passed Harbor Fuel on the bus. Troy was outside, smoking. He turned his head slowly, scanning the street like he was waiting for someone. He didn't see me, or maybe he did, and I just couldn't tell from the angle. A week later, at Walmart, I saw him again. I was in the checkout line. He stood 3 lanes over with nothing but a pack of gum in his hand. He wasn't buying anything. He wasn't in a hurry. He just watched me, expression blank, posture relaxed, his eyes fixed like he was studying something only he understood. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He just waited. I left the store shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice before getting the door unlocked. I thought that was the end of it. And then 2 weeks later, I found out. A friend from school sent me a local news link with the message, "Isn't this your old boss?" Troy had been arrested for abusing a minor. The girl was younger than me. A lot younger. For days, I couldn't eat, couldn't think. I kept replaying the alley, the way he blocked my path, the way he reached for his belt. How close I'd been to being the headline instead of her. Some nights, I still hear the buzz of that floodlight, still feel the silence of that alley, still smell that faint gasoline and diesel mix that clung to his clothes. And even though he's locked up now, I can't shake the habit. Every time I take the trash out behind my new job, I look at the dumpster first, the dark space behind it, the blind spot where cameras don't reach. I wait for my eyes to adjust, for the shadows to settle. I hold my breath and listen. Sometimes, in that split second before I force myself to walk forward, I swear I see something shift in the darkness. A shape, a silhouette, a man-sized shadow that looks exactly like Troy, still standing in a place where no one looks. And the worst part? Some nights, I'm not sure it's just in my head. I was 27 when I became sous chef at Fire and Fork Tavern on 118 Rose Hall Avenue, Street, Petersburg, Florida, and even now I can still feel the exact moment the place began to rot around me. The kitchen smelled like seared steak, burnt citrus, and adrenaline, always adrenaline. I remember thinking the noise would wear me down before the heat did, but the real danger wasn't the flames, or the knives, or the rush. It was the laughter. That loud, sticky, too familiar laughter the staff always gave our GM, Vance, like he'd personally given each of them permission to exist. They didn't just like him, they were addicted to him. And I tried to ignore that sinking feeling that I was the only one who didn't buy into his charm. My first week, I watched him give servers free shots during closing, wink at the bartenders, slap backs, share secrets. People lit up when he walked in, like dogs hearing kibble hit a bowl. I was new, ambitious, serious, the kind of woman who earned her stripes through the work, not through being liked. That made me an outsider. Vance made sure of that, with every too long glance, every mocking little smirk, when I corrected a cook's temperatures or reorganized a station that looked like a toddler had sorted it. Still, I told myself it was normal kitchen crap. This business eats the sensitive alive, and I refused to be one of them. But beneath the noise, the heat, the rhythm, something was wrong. Not wrong, like a dangerous kitchen or a sloppy line. Cook wrong, like a current that kept shifting when I wasn't looking. The night it happened was a late Saturday. The kind of night where sweat dripped down my spine and my fingers were cramped from plating. The exhaust fans hummed like a migraine. I stepped into the back hallway to breathe. That's when I heard it, a muffled, choked-off sound, like someone trying not to cry. When I turned the corner, my stomach dropped so fast I thought I might faint. Vance had Chloe pinned against the dry storage door. Chloe barely 21, thin as a rail, always smiling like she was grateful just to be alive. Her eyes were wet, wide, terrified. His voice was low, tight, venomous. "You don't walk away from me when I'm talking. Understand?" Chloe whimpered. Actually whimpered. My feet moved before my mind caught up. That instinctive protective fire in me rising, ready to pry him off her. That's when he noticed me. His face shifted, instantly smooth, charming, like nothing was wrong. "Oh, hey Maya," he said, hand still blocking Chloe's escape. "We're just talking." Chloe looked right at me, begging silently. I felt the air change. That was the moment I realized this place wasn't a party, it was a cult, and he was the one they worshipped. I didn't say anything then. I just stepped forward, enough to force him to move back. Chloe slipped out from under his arm and practically ran. He watched me with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "That wasn't your business," he murmured. But it was, or maybe I just couldn't pretend it wasn't. I reported him the next morning. Corporate listened, maybe because the restaurant was already under scrutiny for HR issues, maybe because I was the highest-ranking woman in that kitchen, maybe because Chloe's eyes still looked fractured when she walked in. They fired him within 48 hours. I thought removing a predator was supposed to feel good. It didn't. It felt like I'd stepped off a cliff. The next shift I walked into was 20 degrees colder than it should have been. The kitchen wasn't just chilly, it was hostile. Conversations died as I entered. Eyes slid away from mine like I was contagious. My mise en place had been moved. My prep hours of knife work was gone. Someone had dumped it. A joke, I assumed. A cruel, stupid joke. But then, it kept happening. Sauce bases disappeared. Tickets, accidentally, doubled. The walk-in door jammed behind me for 5 long, breathless minutes. And always, I felt eyes on me. Cooks whispering behind the grill. Servers avoiding my gaze. Bussers walking out whenever I approached. One night, when I called out a mistake on the line, a cook named Riley shrugged and said, "Maybe you should have minded your own business, Maya." Vance looked out for us. 2. "Looked out for you?" I snapped. He assaulted someone. He didn't even flinch. People say stuff when they're drunk. Doesn't matter now. Those words hit me like a brick. Doesn't matter now. As in they wanted their fun back, their chaos, their protector. And I had taken him away. Even Chloe, the girl I tried to help, began to avoid me. I'd catch her glancing at me, guilt burning behind her eyes, but she wouldn't speak. Once she whispered, "I'm sorry," before ducking away like someone would punish her for being near me. She was terrified, not of Vance anymore, but of everyone who still loved him. Then came the thing that finally broke me. I was prepping for dinner rush when I smelled something burning, not food fabric. I spun around just in time to see flames licking up my apron strings. The salamander broiler had been left on high. The handle pulled out slightly, so the heat blasted into the walkway. Someone had left a rag near it that had already curled into ash. I slapped the flames out, heart pounding, breath shaking. When I looked up, 3 cooks stood watching. None of them moved. None of them asked if I was okay. That was when I knew they wanted me gone, one way or another. I wrote my resignation after midnight in the dark break room, hands trembling, the cheap pen digging into my fingers. Leaving the key on the expo counter felt like leaving a piece of myself I'd fought to earn. When I stepped outside, the laughter hit me first, loud, carefree, familiar. Curiosity pulled me toward the front window. Inside, huddled at the bar, the entire staff was raising their glasses. The phone on the counter was lit up on FaceTime. Vance's face filled the screen. They were toasting him. Smiling, laughing, celebrating. And Chloe? She lifted her glass too. Her smile was small, shaky, but she raised it. The laughter rang out into the night, muffled through the glass, but unmistakable. It wasn't for me. It never had been. I walked to my car in a daze, the Florida air warm, but feeling like ice against my skin. I kept replaying the image of them all. Every cook, every server, every bartender, glowing under the bar lights like disciples gathered around a resurrected saint. The contrast between the joy inside and the dark parking lot swallowed me whole. My resignation letter still burned in my pocket, even though I'd already left it behind. It felt like a death certificate. Mine. The engine hummed as I drove home, but the sound felt wrong, distant, like something between a lullaby and a warning. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting a line cook to tail me, even though I knew how irrational that was. But after months of feeling watched, followed, singled out, my nerves had no off switch. My apartment was dark when I got inside, the kind of quiet that should have been comforting but only amplified the kitchen noise still echoing in my head, ticket machines beeping, flames hissing, Vance's voice dripping poison. I took a shower, hoping the steam would erase the smell of burnt fabric and fryer oil, but the scent clung to me like guilt. When I closed my eyes, I saw Chloe's face lifting a glass to him. I kept wondering what she was thinking. Was she scared, relieved, grateful, or just resigned? Part of me hated her for it. A larger part hated myself for expecting anything different. Sleep didn't come. I paced my living room for hours, chewing on the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. I replayed every moment that led to this, the report, the silence, the sabotage, the fire. And beneath it all, a small, treacherous thought whispered, what if I was the problem? Kitchens were tribal, tight-knit, unshakable. I had disrupted the tribe. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. For a second, my heart froze. I didn't know what I was expecting. An apology? A threat? Maybe even Chloe calling to explain herself. But the screen showed an unknown number. A text. You didn't have to leave. You didn't have to leave. My hands trembled so hard, I nearly dropped the phone. Another message. They'll calm down. Come by tomorrow. I didn't need the name to know who it was. The image of Vance's face lit by bar lights flashed in my mind. His knowing smile. His control. He didn't need the job anymore, he had their loyalty. Their affection. Their reverence. And somehow, he still thought he had access to me. I blocked the number, but the adrenaline made sleep impossible. Dawn crept through my blinds before exhaustion swallowed me whole. I woke late the next afternoon to pounding on my door. 3 knocks, sharp, impatient. Not friendly. My stomach flipped. I stayed silent, heart hammering against my ribs. The knocking continued for a full minute before retreating. I waited another 10 before approaching the door. No one was there. But tucked under the doormat was a takeout bag with the restaurant's logo. Inside was a single ramekin of my signature marinade, one they'd ruined the previous week, and a folded note. Thought you might want this back, R. Riley. Of course. The message wasn't kind. It wasn't nostalgic. It wasn't anything except a reminder. They still knew where I lived. I threw the marinade in the trash and scrubbed my hands until the sink ran hot, metallic water over my fingers. But the smell, garlic, soy, citrus, lingered in my nose and wouldn't leave. That night, lying in bed with my mind racing, I heard it. Soft laughter outside my window. Not loud, not distinct, but close. Too close. I forced myself not to move, even when I heard what sounded like footsteps shifting on gravel. I told myself it was neighbors, or teenagers, or drunk passers-by. Anything but what it felt like. Familiar voices carrying through the night air. I didn't sleep. Days passed in a blur. I shut the blinds, kept the lights low, avoided leaving except for groceries. Every time I stepped outside, I felt watched. In the cereal aisle, at the mailbox, walking to my car. The way people looked at me, too long, too curious. I couldn't tell if it was real or paranoia. My brain, overworked and underslept, kept replaying that kitchen hostility, the subtle glances, the unspoken blame. It felt like the whole world knew I'd done something unforgivable. One evening, while scrolling job listings, a notification popped up on social media. A post. A tagged photo. The staff, crowded together at the bar again. Chloe, in the middle. And Vance, smirking on video chat, held up proudly by two cooks. The caption read, "Our real GM, forever. Family sticks together." I felt something inside me crack quietly, like a bone splintering under skin. My phone buzzed again. A message request from a fake account. No profile picture. No friends. Just one line. "You were the only one who didn't get it." Well, that night, I unplugged every device in my apartment. I sat in the dark, breathing shallow, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. The silence was somehow worse. In the darkness, a single truth crystallized in my mind, sharp enough to cut. Some monsters don't stalk you. They let everyone else do it for them. I kept hearing their laughter echoing, tinny and distant, like it was coming through glass. Like that night at the window. Like something still watching me. I don't work in kitchens anymore. I barely leave my apartment. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear the sound of the salamander clicking on behind me, even though there's no kitchen here. Sometimes I smell burnt fabric. Sometimes I catch a flash of citrus and garlic, like the marinade they ruined. But the worst part isn't the sounds or the smells. It's the laughter. That always comes first. Soft, muffled, familiar. Right outside the window. I know it's not them. It can't be. They wouldn't bother following me. They've already erased me, replaced me with their version of the truth, raised their glasses to the man who hurt them, toasted him like he was the only one worth choosing. Still, when I lie awake in the dark, I swear I can see shadows gathering beyond the blinds, shapes shifting, faces pressed close, eyes waiting. Maybe it's memory. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's the echo of a place that broke something in me I can't fix. Or maybe some workplaces don't need a monster. They just need everyone, except the one who saw him clearly. The first thing I remember about that day is the smell, burnt rubber, cold metal, and the faint chemical sting that always clung to Silas's clothes, like he'd been dipped in something the rest of us weren't supposed to touch. I should have trusted my instincts. I should have known that anyone who calls himself methodical, with that proud little tilt of the head, is quietly warning you. But back then, I was 28, exhausted, broke, and too used to ignoring the internal alarms that kept trying to drag me out of bad situations. My name is Marley, and at the time I worked the graveyard shift at Northgate Industrial Recycling in Dayton, Ohio, sorting through whatever the city's factories spat out. Silas worked the same shift. He was the type of man people had opinions about, but never out loud. Good worker, they'd say. Quiet, smart in that mechanical way. Or, kinda gives me the chills, you know? But harmless. Harmless. God, that word should come with a warning label. I started carpooling with him because my old Honda kept dying whenever the temperature dipped below 20. Silas offered rides without hesitation almost too quickly, but I told myself I was being dramatic. I'd learned to downplay my discomfort so often that it became instinct. When I slid into the passenger seat that first night, his car smelled like metal filings and something sickly sweet underneath. Like antifreeze. He apologized, telling me he used certain solvents for hobbies. I didn't ask what hobbies. Most nights, we talked about stupid things, work schedules, rude foremen, how Dayton's February cold felt like punishment. But Silas always drifted off topic, slipping into these unsettling monologues about disappearances. People vanish more easily than you think, he'd say, tapping the steering wheel. If the right chemicals get used, even bones. He'd pause, smile faintly. Well, you'd be surprised. I'd laugh nervously, pretending it didn't stick to my ribs like wet ash, but it did. One Wednesday, the air brittle with frost, he turned toward me after our shift and said, "Hey, before I drop you off, want to see something cool I've been building?" His voice was casual. Too casual. The way someone talks when they've rehearsed the line over and over. I said yes, because women are conditioned to be agreeable, because I didn't want to make the ride home awkward, because the silence of a cold apartment felt heavier than sitting through another one of his projects. His house was small, older than it looked, the kind of place with too many locks that didn't match. Inside, everything smelled faintly corrosive, like a lab someone tried to hide inside a home. I told myself it was just the industrial cleaners he claimed to bring home from work. Then, he opened the basement door. A wave of hot, chemical-laced air hit me so hard I gagged. It burned down my throat, sharp and metallic, like I'd inhaled a mouthful of battery acid. Silas laughed. An actual laugh like my reaction was cute. "Don't worry," he said. "Just disposal solvents. Surplus from the plant. They evaporate fast." The basement lights flickered as we descended, buzzing like dying insects. The concrete steps were gritty under my boots, dust and tiny metal shavings crunching as I followed behind him, trying to breathe shallowly. Then my eyes landed on the thing in the center of the room. A steel-lined pit, welded crudely together from scrap sheets, its edges jagged and uneven. Hoses snaked down into it from plastic drums marked with faded hazard labels, chemical warnings smudged and peeling. The concrete around the pit was stained, streaked, slightly melted looking, as if something had eaten into it. The air above it shimmered faintly. My heart stuttered. "What is this?" I whispered. Silas didn't answer right away. He just stepped beside me, looking down at the pit, with a level of affection that made my scalp tighten. Then he sighed, like he'd been waiting years to share this moment. "I've been planning the perfect murder for a long time," he said finally, voice soft, almost tender. "You can't improvise genius. It requires iteration." I froze. He reached for a worn notebook on the workbench and flipped it open. His handwriting crawled across the pages, diagrams, chemical ratios, dates, photos. Practice runs, stray cats, a possum, a deer he'd scavenged from the side of the highway. Detailed notes on how long each one took to react. My vision narrowed, lined with static. The hum of the basement lights deepened into a thick, vibrating drone. I told myself to stay calm, observe, think. "Silas," I said slowly, forcing my voice not to shake. This is dangerous. This isn't something you should be doing." He smiled without looking up. "You're smart, Marley. That's why I thought you'd appreciate the engineering." My pulse hammered so loudly, it felt like he could hear it. He closed the notebook gently, almost lovingly, and turned toward me. "You know," he murmured, stepping behind me, "you're the first person who's ever been down here. The first person smart enough to see the whole plan. That makes you." He leaned in, breath warm on my ear. Dangerous. Something shifted in the atmosphere, an unmistakable change in intention. That was when he shoved me. It happened too fast to think. His hands pressed hard between my shoulder blades, a single, calculated thrust toward the steel pit. But adrenaline makes the world slow down. My boots slipped on the slick, corroded patch of floor, but I twisted, slamming my shoulder back into him with every ounce of survival instinct I had left. Silas staggered, his eyes flicked wide, startled, then furious. He lunged again, grabbing for my arm. We struggled, our boots skidding on the concrete, the air thick with chemical heat. Then his foot slid, just an inch, but enough. His weight pitched forward, his balance snapped, and Silas fell. The sound he made as he hit the chemical surface wasn't human. His scream was short, interrupted, as the fumes burned his throat raw. The hiss of reacting solvents drowned everything else out. The smell, God. The smell clawed its way into my lungs. Sharp, acidic, unforgettable. I stumbled backward, choking, almost slipping myself, then bolted up the stairs, hand trembling as I slammed the basement door shut. I ran. Out the door. Down the street. Into the freezing night until the cold stabbed through my jacket and the burn in my lungs felt survivable. By the time I reached my apartment, I could still hear him, that hiss echoing behind every breath. When the police questioned me, I told the truth. Almost all of it. He slipped, I said. He pushed me first, then he slipped. They nodded like they believed me. Maybe they did. They glanced at the basement, gagged at the smell, muttered about unsafe storage. They called it an accident. They never found the notebook. They never smelled what I smelled. And that was only the beginning. I didn't sleep for 3 days after Silas died. The apartment felt wrong, too quiet, like the air still held the chemical sting from his basement. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the moment his foot slid, the split second, where survival tilted in my favor by pure, cruel luck. But guilt is a shapeshifter. It slid in anyway. By day 4, I went back to work. People stared, whispered, but not for the reason I feared. They'd heard he fell into one of his chemical setups. Someone joked. Figures. Guy was always messing with stuff he shouldn't. Another said, lucky he didn't blow up the block. No one asked why I was there. No one asked what I saw. But every time I walked past Silas's empty workstation, I felt it a tug in my chest, like something unfinished was sitting there, waiting. I told myself to move on, but the body doesn't forget. The senses especially. Any sharp chemical smell, cleaner, gasoline, even nail polish remover, sent a cold ripple down my spine. I'd freeze in grocery store aisles, disoriented, heart climbing my throat. And then the dream started. In the first one, I was back in the basement, the air swirling with heat. The pit glowed faintly. Silas wasn't screaming anymore, he was whispering. A low, bubbling murmur. I couldn't make out words, but the sound crawled under my skin. When I woke, my throat burned like I'd inhaled something corrosive. The second dream was worse. In it, I wasn't me. I stood over the pit, holding the notebook. I flipped, page after page, and every entry ended with the same line. The first attempt must be someone who trusts you. When I reached the last page, the handwriting changed. It was mine. I started waking with the taste of metal in my mouth. One night, weeks after the incident, I heard a faint thump outside my apartment door. Soft, rhythmic, like something being placed. When I opened the door, a small cardboard box sat on the welcome mat. No address, no writing. Inside was a single object. Silas's notebook. I dropped it, stumbling backward as if it had teeth. My hands shook violently. My breath hitched so hard my vision sparked. I hadn't taken it. I knew I hadn't. The cops hadn't seized it, they barely looked around his basement. So how was it here? With a kind of trembling resignation, I picked it up using a dish towel and carried it to the kitchen table. Every instinct screamed at me not to open it. But one page would answer everything. I flipped it open. The first page wasn't his writing. It wasn't mine either. It was a sentence printed in block letters with a black marker, the strokes deep enough to indent the paper. Are you sure he slipped? I dropped the notebook again so hard it slapped the floor. My fingertips went numb. My knees weakened. The apartment spun slightly. I didn't pick it up again. I shoved the notebook into a drawer and locked it, telling myself I'd throw it away tomorrow, or burn it, or take it to the police. But by morning, the drawer was empty. That was when paranoia bloomed fully. I started triple-checking locks, sleeping with a light on, jumping at shadows on the walls. Every creak of the building became a footstep. Every drifting chemical scent, a warning that the past wasn't done with me. But the worst part wasn't fear. It was curiosity. There were days I'd catch myself replaying the basement scene, how quickly he'd moved, how deliberate the shove was. But sometimes, it felt like a memory with pieces missing, like maybe I'd stepped closer to the pit than I recalled. Like maybe his fall wasn't as accidental as I kept insisting. Trauma steals details or invents them. Some nights I whispered into the empty room. I didn't push him. And some nights the air whispered back cold, silent, unconvinced. The turning point came 2 months later, when a new hire joined our night shift. His name was Cody. Young, awkward, overly eager. He asked a lot of questions about procedures, too many, and one night during break, he turned toward me with this oddly familiar half-smile and said, "You worked with Silas, right? Shame what happened. He was a genius." I froze. No one used that word about Silas. No one, except Silas. Cody kept talking casually, unaware my stomach had hollowed out. He talked about his projects sometimes, said he was perfecting something most people wouldn't understand. You ever see his setup? My mouth was dry. My tongue felt glued in place. I muttered, "No, not really." He nodded, almost disappointed. Then he leaned in, just slightly. Shame the notebook went missing. Bet it had some wild stuff in it. My heart thrashed. "Why would you know about a notebook?" I asked, voice thin. He shrugged, still smiling. "Guys like him don't work alone. Someone always picks up the research." Research? Not obsession. Not delusion. Research. The cold seeped deeper than bone. I left my shift early that night, trembling, my pulse a frantic, hopeless flutter. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and dark windows reflecting the look on my own face. Wide-eyed, terrified, hunted. When I stepped into my apartment, the air smelled faintly, like hot metal. I knew that smell. I would know it forever. The notebook was sitting on my kitchen table again. Open. Waiting. The final page, one that hadn't existed before, held a single sentence in neat, surgical handwriting. Iteration continues. And underneath, in lighter ink, just barely traced. The second attempt must be someone who survived the first. The room felt like it tilted. Something cold brushed the back of my neck, or maybe it was just my own breath coming too fast. I backed away slowly, every part of me screaming to run, to hide, to disappear the way Silas said people could. But I knew the truth now. The pit wasn't the threat. The plan was. And someone, maybe Cody, maybe someone else was still building. Still revising. Still watching. I don't sleep anymore. I don't turn my back to dark rooms. I don't carpool. I don't trust the silence. Because the worst part isn't the night I escaped Silas's basement. It's knowing that somewhere, someone believes I wasn't supposed to. And they're still working on correcting that mistake.